That I would imagine for the next 12, 15 minutes that I would be the defense attorney for the finance industry. And that's what I wanted to talk about, and also talk a little bit about regulation, why that's not working in our industry very well at the minute, and possibly end with a few comments about what it means for you guys in the audience. So I have one exhibit, which is my Exhibit A in terms of the case for the defense. And I guess just to get your opinion, how many of you kind of agree with that when global markets melted down in 2007, it was largely as a result of the recklessness of banks? Stick your hand up if you think that's pretty true. Okay. And keep your hand up if you think that we should tax the banks to get some money back from bailing them out in the first place. Okay, a few of you. And finally, put your hand up if you think that bankers' pay should be curbed. Okay, sort of quite a few. So I kind of wonder why you're thinking about a career in this industry, but that's probably for another. But so here goes my case for defence, and it kind of starts with. So I moved house about 6 months ago, and as you do, you get to meet your neighbours. They invited me and my wife around for dinner, and people ask what I do. And I never say the F word now. So I never say finance. I just say I'm in the software industry. And a bit later on, after a few more glasses of wine, I've been drunk, someone said to me, "Okay, Steve, well, tell me a bit more about the software you write." And I looked in the eyes and I said, "Well, my company writes software that helps banks place large bets on global markets, global financial markets." All the other conversation stops and everyone looks at me. And then I think, oh God, here we go again. They're going to vent their collective spleen on the representative from the banking industry. And this is what I said. I looked them all in the eye and I said, actually, the truth is that you can't actually uncouple finance from the real economy. And in fact, finance is inextricably combined with the real economy. And in fact, it's the heart of the real economy. And so if there's something wrong, morally wrong with finance, then perhaps that's asking bigger questions of society as a whole. And it's kind of interesting because the other inconvenient truth is that pretty much everyone had their snouts in the gravy train. So no one was complaining pre-2007 that they could get mortgages higher than the loan value of their homes. And no one was complaining they could get second, third, fourth mortgages to do buy-for-let properties. And then it went bang, and everyone had to find someone to blame. So just to be clear, I'm not defending the behaviour of individuals that break the law, but it's interesting that you don't have to look too much further outside of finance to see similar terrible behaviour. Look at what BP has done to the Gulf of Mexico. Look, for example, there's a story I read about a few years ago of a firm that poisoned 300,000 babies in China because it deliberately sold their mothers contaminated baby milk. And 54,000 of those kids were hospitalized. And there was a story before that of a firm that diluted olive oil with industrial oil to make more money and killed 1,000 people in Spain. And it's kind of interesting because you have this sort of moral backlash against the banking industry, but actually the greed and corruption and all that's bad probably affects all sorts of businesses everywhere. And that, in my view, creates a huge problem when it comes to regulation. And to go on another bit of a tangent, before this happened to me, I used to travel a lot on business. And traveling's fairly boring when you do it month in, month out. And so I read a lot. And one of the more interesting books I came across was something called The Watchman's Rattle by someone called Rebecca da Costa, I think. And it introduced me to a concept that was new to me called cognitive dissonance. And the idea is that when a system gets just so complicated, the human brain stops trying to understand the pieces of it and just comes up with a belief system. So, for example, when you walk in a room and flick a light switch, you just expect the light to come on. You don't say, what sort of power generator was it that created electricity? How was it delivered through a substation to the building I'm in? Delivered through the wall, wires in the wall, and reacted with the filaments in the light bulb. You flick the switch and expect it to come on. And that's okay for lights, and it's okay for cell phones, and it's okay for ATMs. But when you're trying to regulate an industry, it's a real problem. Because imagine you've just got the job, you've got the big job, you're the regulator of financial markets. And you're sat at your desk, moving things around, thinking how important you are and you've become, and the phone rings. And it's your boss who's a politician. And he asks how you're getting on, and you say, I guess you're okay, thank you very much. And then he says, well, what are you going to do about those bastards at the banks? And you suddenly realize you've got to start passing some rules and passing some rules quickly. And against this kind of backlash, you don't have the time to understand the detail. So what do? You come up with a belief system. And regulators all around the world have come up with the same three constructs. Lit markets are better than dark. You should favor the retail investor over the institutional investor. And best of all, HFT is some evil scourge that needs to be wiped out. And for reasons that we haven't got really time to go into now, those are gross oversimplifications. And so what happens is the regulators pass a bunch of rules that create all sorts of unintended consequences that mean they have to pass more rules to correct those earlier mistakes. And they end up in this continual cycle of sort of introducing one rule after another. And then these rules interact with other rules that other regulators have created. And the whole thing gets a bit of a mess pretty quickly. And the thing that's interesting about that is you can see that the regulators are struggling to do that. And what it does is it pushes up the cost of participating in that industry. And that means that every time you and I participate in a financial market, whether it's buying a financial product, a mortgage, a loan, a credit card, whatever, it costs us fractionally more thanks to the regulators. And then you have, as the regulator, you have your brainwave. And you ring the politician back again. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to tax those bastards. Every time they make a trade, I'm going to introduce a financial transactions tax. And I'll tax them. And the politicians think you're brilliant. Because for the first time ever, they're going to introduce a popular tax. And the catch is that it's a sales tax, like VAT. Now, who ultimately pays VAT? That's right, we all do. So again, our costs of participating in markets have all gone up. The politicians are making us pay again. And all the fee, the extra taxes that the banks pay just get kicked on down the line. And then the third point, you know, I'm a taxpayer myself. So thanks to the intervention of our government, I'm a small shareholder in RBS and a number of other financial institutions. And imagine, you know, if someone rang me up, the recruitment agency that was trying to find the chief exec of RBS, rang me up and said, we've got 2 people on the shortlist. We've got this guy, he's really good. He's probably the best, but he's blooming expensive. And I said, well, what about the other guy? And they said, well, he's actually a bit rubbish, actually, but he's cheap and he wants to give it a go. I know who I'd want looking after my investment. And so, if you think about it, I guess the point in all of this is that trust in financial markets is at its lowest point ever, just as its complexity is at its highest point ever. And it's probably people like you who are going to have to try and fix that. My eldest son's about the age of some of you here. He's a budding journalist, and he refers to me as the X generation and him as the Y generation. I don't quite know what it means, other than he has a lot more fun than I do. But you guys are going to have that responsibility. And it's going to get more complicated, because imagine once, for example, cryptocurrencies are now intermingled with real-world government currencies. That's going to create some interesting dynamics. And at the same time, you guys are going to be responsible for introducing properly into our industry social media, mobile, and some of the new great advances in graphical processing and user interfaces. And so, it seems to me that as well as being quite a challenging time in our industry, it's one of tremendous opportunity, but also great responsibility. And that was really kind of everything I had to say. And as the case of my defense, I rest my case. Thank you for your time.